Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Sandy Smith, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Air Force is Sergeant Patrick Moran. We are honoured to welcome the members of the 45th Infantry Battalion Association who are attending this evening's ceremony. The story of Lieutenant Thomas Alexander McIntyre, who served in the 45th Battalion during the First World War, will be told shortly. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. The live stream of this ceremony is made possible by the Returned and Services League of Australia and the RSL and Services Clubs Association. We welcome members who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by visitors to the memorial and students on behalf of the Compass Student Leaders Conference 2025. If you are now able, I invite you to please stand and join in singing the national anthem.
Australians, oh, let us rejoice, for we are one and free. We've golden soil and wealth for toil, our home is got by sea. Our land abounds in nature's gifts of beauty, rich and rare. In history's page, let every stage advance Australia fair. In joyful strains, then let us sing, advance Australia fair.
For those who are able, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight we'll read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 103,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first we present a lament. Flowers of the forest, wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection.
Today, we remember and pay tribute to Lieutenant Thomas Alexander McIntyre. Thomas McIntyre was born in Jaspers Brush, New South Wales, on the 13th of March, 1887, the second of 11 children born to Thomas McIntyre and Hannah Trenbarth. Thomas Jr. attended Jaspers Brush Public School and joined the Freemasons Brotherhood. At the outbreak of the First World War, Thomas was 27 years old and working as a carpenter. Just 6 weeks after Great Britain declared war on Germany, he and his younger brother Lewis enlisted in the Australian Imperial Force on the 21st of September 1914 at Rosehill Camp in Sydney. Assigned to D Company of the 13th Infantry Battalion with the rank of private, Thomas McIntyre was sent to Broadmeadows Camp, Victoria, for training. On the 22nd of December 1914, Thomas and the 13th Battalion embarked for active service on board the troop ship Ulysses from Melbourne. The troops arrived in Egypt in February 1915, and on the 25th of April, half of the 13th Battalion began landing on Gallipoli. Private McIntyre and D Company disembarked at Anzac Cove at 3:30 the next morning, 26th of April. From May to August, the battalion was heavily involved in establishing and defending the Anzac position on the front line. During the Gallipoli campaign, Thomas was admitted to hospital twice. In June, he spent 2 days with an unspecified illness or injury in hospital on Gallipoli. In late November, he was evacuated on a hospital ship to Egypt, suffering from jaundice. He spent several months convalescing, and during this time, Allied troops withdrawn from the peninsula. Following the conclusion of the failed Gallipoli campaign, the battalion returned to Egypt and the AIF was greatly expanded and reorganised. The 13th Battalion was split and provided experienced soldiers for the 45th Battalion. On the 3rd of March 1916, Thomas was transferred to the 45th Battalion. A month later, he was promoted to corporal and the next day to sergeant. Now part of the 12th Brigade of the 4th Australian Division, the 45th Battalion left Egypt for the Western Front on the 2nd of June, disembarking at Marseille on the 8th of June 1916. At Etapla, Thomas was promoted to second lieutenant on the 25th of July 1916. The 45th fought their first major battle at Pozières in August, defending ground previously captured by the 2nd Australian Division. After Pozières, the battalion spent the next few months alternating between duty in the trenches and training rest behind the lines, first around Ypres in Belgium and then in the Somme Valley in France. On the 5th of February 1917, Thomas McIntyre was further promoted to lieutenant and sent on an Army Mine School course. In early March, he was admitted to hospital with mumps and spent 3 weeks at Ricourt Rest Station. The 45th Battalion was in reserve for the 4th Division's first major action of 1917. The First Battle of Bullecourt was not committed to the attack. They were, however, heavily engaged during the Battle of Messines in June. On the 10th of June 1917, just before 11 p.m, Thomas led a bombing party of 50 men to attack a German strongpoint at Messines. The group encountered severe machine gun fire and shelling. Casualties for the battalion at Messines were very heavy, with 100 killed, 352 wounded, and 50 missing. Among the dead was Lieutenant Thomas McIntyre. Hit by artillery shrapnel, he was killed instantly. He was 30 years old. McIntyre's body was never recovered, and he is commemorated at the Meningate Memorial in Ypres, Belgium. 3 of Thomas's brothers also served in the First World War. His brother Lewis, who had enlisted and served with, survived Messines and was severely wounded a few months later. After the death of her son Thomas, Mrs. McIntyre wrote to the Department of Defence to plead for the return of son Lewis. Recently widowed herself, she needed help on the family farm which she was dependent on for a living. Lewis was allowed to return to Australia in early 1918. Another of Thomas's brothers to serve was George McIntyre. He received a military medal and returned home. Their youngest brother Raymond died fighting at Passchendaele. His body was never recovered, and like Thomas, Raymond is commemorated at the Meaning Gate. Thomas McIntyre's name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my right, among almost 62,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. His photograph is displayed today beside the pool of reflection. This is but one of many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Lieutenant Thomas Alexander McIntyre, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hopes of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the Ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Poziere or in the low scrub at Gallipoli with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of our director, staff and volunteers, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support during the memorial's development project. We wish you all a very pleasant evening.